We continue our conversation with Robert Wilkie, the former Secretary of Veterans Affairs and also former Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness under President Trump. Secretary Wilkie, I've had many conversations with you in the past. Your deep concern for our veterans and how they can get the care that they deserve, that they're owed, especially in these extraordinary times after the global war on terror and the very unique aspects of what those veterans had to deal with overseas and have to deal with back home. That's why I was struck by this tweet from Congressman Corey Mills of Florida. He's a veteran as well. He pointed out that June is Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder Awareness Month. But all you see from the military is, well, is this stuff. It's all about pride. It's all about inclusion. It's all about the priority of diversity and equity, specifically focused on sexual orientation and sexual identity. I hate to keep beating this drum, but where's the messaging, where's the concern, where's the focus on PTSD? Because they give lip service to our vets,
Right.
but they don't actually spend a lot of time focusing on it.
I'll just give you an example, Larry, of what happened at Veterans Affairs. The last time you and I talked when I was in office, I was at the end of 3 years of fighting the Pelosi House from ripping down Abraham Lincoln's words from our VA hospitals and our VA headquarters, the famous passage that begins with malice toward none from the second inaugural.
Yes.
Because Pelosi and her friends decided that, Honest Abe had the temerity not to mention 21st century pressure groups in a speech that he gave in March of 1865. Well, the first thing that this secretary did was begin the process to rip those words down, which he did. And that's been the priority. It's been on progressive theatrics. You just showed a snapshot of the face page of the unit my father commanded in, the 82nd Airborne Division, which is America's primary strategic strike force in terms of conventional operations. Now those commanders cannot even allow a higher standard of physical fitness to be imposed on their division because this Secretary of the Army says it's not going to be equitable. And unlike other conventional military forces, the 82nd Airborne, those soldiers carry everything they fight with on their backs, over 100 pounds. But yet the commanders under the Biden Pentagon cannot say, we need higher physical standards.
Right.
And in my father's day, he was allowed to impose those, but you can't now. And now, one last thing, and this gets to really the heart of defending the country. No longer will senior enlisted and officers have physical fitness failures put on their efficiency report. That's sort of an aw shucks to the troops that we really don't take this stuff seriously.
Well, and of course, the irony here, Secretary Wilkie, I think the irony is lost on these leaders, most of them civilian, but certainly there are military leaders who are influenced by the politics of those civilian leaders, that if Russia or North Korea or Iran or China have their way because we're not ready and focused on defeating our enemy, not only will the plight of the climate be a lot worse off, but also the plight of gay people around the world. You want Iran to win that discussion? You want China to win that discussion, or Vladimir Putin? If you really do care about diversity and inclusion, you'll make sure that our military is as strong as possible to defeat the enemies of freedom and liberty.
Yeah, and look, I've said this, and people thought I was joking, but I'm not. With these changes in policy, the changes in emphasis, we see a leadership that's bound and determined to give the enemy a fair fight. And equity will get people killed. If you don't, I would rather have 2 troops in shape at the top of their game than have to carry 8 more who don't meet basic physical fitness standards. And last thing, when you continually call this nation irredeemably racist or unjust, why would you want people to defend it? Those are words from Joe Biden, and you've been talking about China for years. When the Secretary of State went to our state of Alaska and was harangued by the Chinese foreign minister, saying that America was racist, that he was just quoting Joe Biden's speeches. The only thing that the Secretary of State could do was mouth a bunch of academic pieties about how we have to do better.
Right.
When had that been Richard Nixon or Larry O'Connor, the response would be the United States would not be lectured by a country that has murdered 100 million of its own people since 1949.
Secretary Wilkie, you keep talking about your father and this whole tradition in America of sons and daughters following in their fathers and mothers'
Yes.
footsteps and joining the military. It's still there. As you keep alluding to, I just got to enjoy my daughter's graduation and commissioning from the Naval Academy, and it was great to see generations of families in uniform celebrating their 22-year-old just getting their commission. But it's waning. I hear from it all the time on my radio program. I've got vets who call me and tell me I would not recommend my son join the military now. Are they taking this seriously at the Pentagon? Do they know that this is a problem, or is this kind of the plan? You mentioned those states from Virginia to Texas. Well, they don't like the people in those states. Are they trying to remake the military in their own image?
Well, I think they are. I think they are. I think the military was really the last bastion of traditional patriotism, a traditional concept of America and what it means to defend it. And part of this leftist push has been to destroy everything that makes America unique. I spent 3 years fighting their attempts to remove Abraham Lincoln,
Yeah.
in his words from VA. I mean, just think about that. And I hate to quote the great philosopher Bill Maher, but he said something a few months ago that struck me. He said, for liberals, it used to be that Abraham Lincoln was good and that racial blindness was better. And now this has been turned on its head.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I worry because when this last happened, when the military imploded in on itself when I was in high school after Vietnam, at least Jimmy Carter didn't despise the nation that he led. And he made sure that people who thought the way he did were put in positions of power.
Yeah.
And I think that's the great difference between now and then. And it is sending a signal, particularly to people who traditionally think about the military, that they're not welcome.
Secretary Wilkie, before I let you go, California Governor Gavin Newsom looks like he's running for something, whether Joe Biden steps aside or not. Either this time or next time, he's going, and he's been confronted on the sorry state of affairs in his state, specifically with regard to the homeless situation. And I know as Secretary of the Veterans Affairs, you were very much honed in on that and focused on that. It's an absolute embarrassment and shame for our nation that so many of the people who are homeless are veterans. How is that progress? This should be something that transcends party lines.
Well, you and I actually talked about efforts for VA in your own hometown. The area of Los Angeles outside of VA, the central part of the city,
Yeah.
was disgraceful. You've got the pictures of now. We were actually sending teams out to grab veterans and even put them behind the fence at VA. The majority of those in the VA community who are homeless, actually, really, the majority are still Vietnam veterans, and they were never welcomed home. I certainly saw that in my father's own career. But the problem in places like Los Angeles is that it's such a permissive climate that VA is left picking up the pieces. Because by the time we reach those veterans, they have been put in a place where drug use is not looked askance on, where there's no law and order, and things tend to spiral down. I think it's a problem of governance, and the military is just really on the tail end of what people like Gavin Newsom and Gascon and several of the others have been doing to, well, there's certainly the mayor of Portland and the mayor of Seattle, what they've done to our cities.
It sounds like no matter how aggressive and effective the policies from Veteran Affairs might be to focus on homeless vets, if you don't have local and state laws that continue to enforce those common sense basics of Western civilization, it's just always going to be an uphill fight. Secretary Wilkie, we got to leave it there, sadly. We are up against it. You know how the clock is. It's rough. But thank you for joining us. Don't be a stranger. We want to have you back. Good stuff. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight.